in which case I'll get started. I just started recording. Okay. So question 1 is a probability question, I guess a 101 probability question. Let's say we have to draw 2 cards from a shuffled deck, one at a time. What's the probability that the second card is not an ace? So let's take 5 minutes on your own and jot down your notes or solution, and we'll reconvene in a couple of minutes. For anyone that is stuck, just give some hints away over we've got, give you 2 more minutes, but think about the physical scenarios if you're stuck. Give away a couple more hints for anyone that wants them. Look away if you don't want hints. But we have 2 scenarios. So think about probabilities relating to these 2 scenarios. Okay, that's 5 minutes. I think in an interview scenario, I don't think an interviewer would want to spend more than 5 minutes on a question like this. So just to give you a sense of what that time feels like. Does anybody want to kick us off, share a solution end to end, or just get us started? Yeah, Joyce, go for it.
Okay, the way I did it was I split the cases into two mutually exclusive cases. So you have ace and ace, ace and then non-ace, or non-ace and then non-ace.
Right.
So if you do, I'm calling the first case like AN, I guess. So number of possibilities for an ace is 4, and then number of non-aces is 48. So you do 4 times 48. For the second scenario, you could pick any one of 48 cards for the first non-ace, and then 47 for the second non-ace. So that would be 48 times 47. Then you add up 48 times 4 plus 48 times 47 and divide that all by 52 times 51, because that's the number of ways you could choose 2 cards in a space where order matters, I think. So in the end, I got 12 over 13.
Okay. So
That's what I got too. But is that right? Because that's the same chance as the first one, not just the first card not being an ace. And that's freaking me out. Is that right?
Right. So just to summarize what Joyce just said, exactly what I've got here. If we think about the two scenarios and stepping it through, you get these two trade-offs. And just to reiterate on terminology here, whenever we're thinking about a scenario as an and, statistically, the, I guess, symbol correlating with and is your intersection, is the way I like to think of it, and that correlates to product multiplication in the probability world. So then, as Joyce said, the probability of not getting an ace altogether is combining those two scenarios. What if either of them happened? And in the probability world, we're thinking of union, which correlates to summation. And Joyce, did you say your final number was this? I did it in a decimal. What was your fraction?
Yeah, pretty sure.
Yeah, that's the decimal.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, cool. And then, yeah, Jacob, you bring up a really good point. One, we use the product rule in this scenario. So the product rule applies to independent events. So we want to think about the validity of that. And then just to jump to Jacob's point, like, does the order actually matter in this scenario? Because
yeah, I think the key here is that you don't really have to condition on the first card because you're not told what that is. So in fact, you can envision this as if you drew the first card and didn't even look at it. And then what is the turn over the second card? What's the probability that's an ace, knowing nothing else about the deck? So that's why it's the same answer that you would get for the first card.
Right. Exactly. So if we were to just think about it being that 48 that's left over, not thinking about the aces, we actually get the exact same answer. And I think Robert summarized it really nicely.
But it is nice to see that the math works that way too.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the default in these scenarios is to go into that logical, how does it play out? And I actually think that's probably the right way to start. Otherwise, if you jump straight to probabilities, you can get in your head a little bit about it. But so I think playing it out is good, but it is a good reminder in the thinking about in this type of scenario to actually ask that question: does the order matter up front? And I think that's it's good to know that the math works out, like you said. So that's a nice 101 probability question. Does anyone have anything they want to chime in on?
I do actually. When I did my mock technical interview, it was a variation on this question, and the interviewer told me, because I started going into the math of it right away. He said, in an interview situation, his recommendation is to talk through the problem first and ask any of those questions, and then before getting into the math or the coding or whatever, to walk the interviewer through your thought process, what you're going to do before you do it. That way, if you screw up, well, first of all, you might get some hints. Second of all, if you screw up the math or the coding, they at least know you know where you're going with it, whether or not you get it exactly right. So, sorry, that just really jumped out at me because I had a pulling cards question.
Totally. And Dan, it's the exact reason why I chose this, because I had the exact same experience where, and I think under pressure too, like I say, I jumped straight to the numbers thinking, okay, well, there are 4 aces and there are 52 cards, and you get straight to the numbers and get all caught up in your head. And I notoriously myself have a history of getting these problems wrong throughout. I remember back in high school, through my degree, I would always get these wrong because I would jump ahead. So, but they are really straightforward questions. And when you get the answer, you do a big facepalm moment. So it's a really good point. This question was from Interview Query. The solution doesn't match the question. They ask this question, they ask what's the probability of the second card not being an ace, and then the solution that they give is the probability of the second card being an ace. So if you are going onto Interview Query, be mindful of that. They've stuffed up there. Some more resources if you do want to review some product rule, sum rule. Khan Academy always has a special place in my heart. Coursera also has some probability stuff if you want to do some review there. Again, I'll share these slides. All these links will be available if you want to look at them. But moving on to question 2, Amanda, do you want to share screen or do you want me to click through slides for you?
You can click through the slides. That should work just fine.
Okay. Yep. Okay. Cool. All right. Well, I'm going to hand over to Amanda for the next 15 minutes.
Okay, so this is our SQL question. You have 2 tables, and we want you to create a query that's going to find the 7-day rolling average for new COVID cases in each county for the Great Lakes Bureau of Economic Analysis region. So I'll give you a couple minutes to think through it. I'm not going to give you all 5 minutes because this one is actually fairly complex. And like Dan was saying, what we really want to hone in on here is how you're going to work through this problem, not if you get the answer right.
I'll just share with you the sample result table if you want to have a look at what the resulting table will look like from your query.
You can go to the hints if you want.
Okay, got some hints. I wish I could show more than one at a time. A couple of hints here while you're thinking about it.
And I probably should be keeping track of time, but I am not. So
It's been about 2-ish minutes, 2.5 minutes.
I also have a very upset beagle, just in case anybody's wondering. It's 3 minutes to dinner time, so he's very unhappy with me right now.
Bad timing with questions.
Do you mind going back to the original table?
To the,
Oh, yes, thank you.
This one?
Yep.
so does anybody have any idea where they want to start this? Bueller.
I know, I feel like I just like stumbled upon this trying to study SQL more. It's like average over, right? That
Right, right. You are going to want to go to a window function, but if I was interviewing you and this was the question that I gave you, there's a couple places that I would want you to start. First off, I want you to look at the tables and figure out which columns you need from the tables and what data is actually in there. So I would expect a few clarifying questions right off the bat. Like, first off, what is represented in this, in the counties table by cases? Right, so if we look at this, if you ask that question, I would be telling you that the cases are actually cumulative per day. So we don't have the new cases number. So we would need to create a column to get to that. And then the other thing that we want to know, so when you run a SQL query, it runs from and join before it runs anything else. So you want to make sure that you know the columns that you need to look at and how you need to join your tables. That's the first thing you got to figure out. So does anybody see a way to join these tables?
It's asking for the counties, and it looks like in this analysis region, and it looks like states belong to analysis regions. Is that right?
That's correct.
So I don't know what state would be in the Great Lakes, but if it's like Michigan.
Does each state fall in one Bureau Economic Analysis region?
Each state has, each state is assigned to one specific Bureau of Economic Analysis region. And so we need to be able to join the states and then filter out by that economic analysis region. So does anybody know how we would do that?
I think it would be, so we would want to join the counties and regions tables on the state where Bureau of Economic Analysis region equals Great Lakes.
Exactly. Exactly. And then once we have that, we've filtered it down. So now all that we're going to have in our data table that it's going to evaluate further is going to be all of the counties and all of the regions that are Great Lakes. So then we have to make it calculate the number of new cases that we're getting every day. And we're going to need to use
and you want to make sure that's a left join so that each row from the original counties table.
No.
No?
No, because if the state matches, it's going to pull in all of the counties. We don't need a left join on here. We're going to inner join this. Because if I left join it, then like here where it's like Washington, that's not in the Great Lakes region. So I'm still going to get that in my results table. And when I go to sort it and order it and put in my Windows functions, I'm going to have a lot of counties that I don't need. So you're going to slow your query down if you do that. So do you want to forward to the solution? We can explain what this is doing. So right here where we've got this cases, lag cases over 1, what that's saying is take the cases number on my current row, and then from that I want to subtract the cases number on the row above it. And I'm going to create a new field called new daily cases. And then I'm renaming cases as cumulative cases just to keep them straight. So all of that is from your counties table. Then when you join this regions table on state, you want to make sure that counties and regions both equal state. And when you join them, we're putting in this little and clause here to filter it to the Great Lakes region. And because I created this table myself, there's a huge typo here, and I apologize for that, but it still works. So what we're doing here, because we have 2 window functions, and you can't use a window function on a window, on a calculated column, which is why we have this with CTE as, and this is common table expressions, which basically are like a subquery, but they're easier to read than a subquery. So then here is where my final select is. And this is where I'm going to do the average in this window, partitioned by state and county. Order it by your date ascending to get the last 6 rows. So now I'm going to get this window of 7, and I'm going to take the average and put that in the next day.
Hope you like my pointing. I feel like a salesman of some kind.
So what would be like the key parts that you would look for if you were like asking this question? Is it like just important to know like how to join the tables, like how to filter them, or is it like you have to know the order also and also?
No. The whole thing that I would be looking for, honestly, I wouldn't care if you got this answer even remotely close. But the first thing that I want to know is, are you actually thinking about what the question is that I'm asking? Or are you jumping in, just like with the probability one, are you immediately jumping to the math? So are you immediately jumping and go, well, I want to take the average of these 7. But there's more to it on that problem, because I would expect you to ask what these columns actually were. Because if you just average the cases, you're not going to have that new case number, because that column happens to be cumulative by date. Right, so you would have to know that somehow I want to subtract row 5 from row 6 to get the new cases for that day. And then once I get those new cases, now I need to go back and average the 7. In every row, I want to average it from the 6 above. So I wouldn't expect you to understand how to write a window function. I mean, it's not something that you use all the time. And there's a lot of different ways to write them. But what we're really looking for is, can you look at these tables, understand the data that's there, and see how you have, what you have available to combine? Because like that solution table looks nothing like either of the 2 tables that you had. Right, so you had to calculate a lot of stuff in there, and you had to really understand your data to be able to do that.
Yeah, I'll just take it back to that results table. Yeah.
And then if you look, there's kind of a breakdown. I think it's
I did. Sorry.
this one. Yeah. So you can see here, this is where we join these tables. They both had the state column. And then we used this and to be able to filter on the Bureau of Economic Analysis. So if it matched on both of these, right? So if it was Illinois, and New England, and Great Lakes, it would take it. But because California and California go to far west, that's not going to go into our result set. So you're filtering it on the join there with that and statement. And then in the next one, the first query that we did, which was the common table expression, we did a window function here to calculate the cases each day, right? So you can see here where it's lag cases 1, it's going to take the row above it. So you're going to subtract 1 from 0 to get the 1. And then we took this new cases here and we went 6 rows up. So we got 7 rows. And then we put the average in here where it's the 0.142 because there was only 1 new case over 7 days. And this partition by is grouping.
Does anybody have any questions before I click off this slide?
I know these SQL questions can get a little, they can be intimidating because it sounds like it's super straightforward then when they're just like write a query to get the 7-day average. But again, it's just like that probability question. Unless you actually dive in and ask some clarifying questions, you're probably going to go way past what they were looking for.
I had 2 questions.
Sure.
So if you go back, this partition by FIPS. So I was thinking of even not using that column, but it looks like you're using it. Instead of FIPS, I could have used county, right?
You could have done state and county, yes. So counties are only unique by state. They do repeat. So like you have Yuma, Arizona, and Yuma, Colorado. So you would need just like in the bottom state county.
Mm-hmm.
I used FIPS up here because I had it. If I would have kept the column FIPS in the CTE, I could have used it down here as well.
Mm-hmm. Then in your previous slide, Amanda, so the key here is that one state belongs to one economic analysis region. If that was not the case, I don't think there is a query that answers that question.
Right.
And last question to Robert's point, you said inner join. If you've done a left join, I think it would have worked. You'd have just run a little bit slower because you might have considered a larger data set, but that and economic analysis equals Great Lakes would have still given you the same result.
Well, so that's on the join, yeah.
Right, so the join would have been a left join. That second and would have filtered for the exact same data set.
Yeah.
And you would have gotten the same result, even if you did a left.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Amanda, can I get you to comment on, just because I asked on this earlier, with the reasoning for your and versus the where here?
Right, so this actually just makes it a much more quick query to run because you're going to filter all of those rows before it starts doing any calculations. So remember that your from and joins run first. So I'm cutting down all the data. So this just makes it a much more, I can't think of the word, but it makes it quicker to run. It's going to be
right. So is the
a
where
bit more streamlined.
Is the where going to run at a later point than an and?
The where runs later, right? So you're doing this in 1 step instead of 2. And then once you, down here where you've got all of these calculations and stuff, you're going to be calculating on fields that you don't need, which is why you want to run the where first. You're going to cut down the amount of rows before you start doing any other calculation on it, which is why the select is always the last thing to run.
Yeah.
If I understood this correctly, you said from, join, where, is that the order?
Yep.
And in the join, is there a specific order if you have multiple conditions?
So if you're using an inner join, it doesn't matter what order you write the tables in. If you're writing a left join, then the table order makes a big difference. Same with right join. Right join doesn't exist in all SQL instances because you can just flip the tables and get the same result.
I'm asking if you have a join with multiple and conditions. Is there an order there or no?
Again, it depends upon what you're, like, are you, so if I wanted to do join regions on state and county, right, I could do 2 to create a compound key, or I could filter it. You could use an and for a bunch of different things, I guess. So I'm not sure what you're really asking here.
So if I have multiple ands, condition 1 and condition 2 and condition 3 and. is there an order where condition 1 is executed first, then condition 2, then condition 3, or they're all done in parallel and then you're...
So it depends upon your instance of SQL, and SQL goes and optimizes the query for you. Because remember, SQL is declarative. You're not telling it how to run anything. You're just telling it, this is what I want you to get. SQL goes through and it actually optimizes the query to get it to run as efficiently as possible. But it can only do certain steps. Like it has to do the from and join first. And it would do a subquery first if you had that.
Got it.
So, right. So for me, I want to filter out as much as possible first, which is why if I had like, and the Bureau of Economic Analysis equaled Great Lakes, and I only wanted to see the couple places where they overlapped with like circuit courts or whatever, you know, and circuit court is 9, then I might only get, you know, 4 states that meet that instead of the 7 that meet the other one. But it shouldn't make a big difference because SQL's going to optimize that for you.
Thank you, Amanda. And outside of and, what other operators can you use?
You can use just about anything you want in a join, right? So you can do, you know, again, it's, you can do multiple joins. You can join on multiple columns. You can join on, you know, it's greater than this, it's less than this, any regular operator that you want. And you can put a where in there as well.
Saying one option would be or. Let's say if you need an or, could you use an or?
Right. Yep. So you could do regions on state equals state, Bureau of Economic Analysis is Great Lakes or Upper Midwest or whatever you wanted. And you could do an in, right? So, and Bureau of Economic Analysis in Great Lakes, Midwest, whatever, as long as you separated them with a comma.
Cool. Thank you.
To summarize some of that, I think we've pretty much touched on all those sort of summary points on asking clarifyings, joining, thinking about the what's and the hows, order of operations, just had a good discussion on that.
If you're interested in more on like order of operations and how to structure a query, I just did a post on Medium about it that walks you through it. And I can actually Slack a Jupyter notebook that'll give you the way to create all of these tables so that you can actually run through these SQL yourself.
That'd be awesome. If you can Slack both the article and your Jupyter, that'd be awesome.
Yep, I can do that.
I've got a couple of just resource links to look up some of these functions if you want to read up. I think there's some documentation links there. There's also some tutorial stuff and some examples of some of those functions and clauses that we used in that solution. And then, yeah, look forward to seeing your links in the Slack. Thanks, Amanda. That's really awesome. Very, very helpful. Okay. Well, does anybody have any comments on the SQL front before we move on to machine learning?
I just thought it was interesting how both questions, being so different, kind of have the same lesson about clarifying the problem and reading the problem carefully before diving into it.
Very, very.
I think if there's one thing you take away from every technical interview, it's that ask those clarifying questions ahead of time. I know a lot of times they give you like those algorithms that you see all the time, like do the FizzBuzz thing, and you just want to go like immediately and write it. But if you do that, you're missing the point. They want to understand how you're thinking, not necessarily if you know lag and lead and, you know, rank over and anything like that.
Awesome. All right, well, for this next one, this machine learning one, it is, like most machine learning ones, a little more of a brainstorm type question. But I guess it has slightly more of a harder solution than the one we did last week, which is quite open-ended with when we did the Facebook groups one. So again, I'll give you maybe just 2 or 3 minutes to jot down some of your thoughts, maybe do a Google cheat or something, but then we'll discuss together. So this one, you're told that your regression model is suffering from multicollinearity. How do you verify it's true? And build a better model. So just take 2 minutes to jot down some of your thoughts on this and think about how you might phrase it in an interview scenario. Cool, that was about 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 2 minutes. What comes to mind? There's sort of two parts to this question. There's the verifying and the dealing with multicollinearity. Does anyone want to start us off?
Maybe compute correlation matrix.
Yeah, and what would that lead to? Once you've calculated it, what are you going to take from it?
If you see predictors which are highly collinear, so correlation is close to 1 or -1, then maybe just pick one of those and remove others. And another approach is, okay, well, yeah. And in terms of dealing with it, you can use regularization.
So regularization, you said?
Yeah.
We're in America, I guess. Regularization. Okay. Cool. Do you want to elaborate on the regularization part, Svetlana, for a dealing technique?
Okay, well, there is L2, L1, and L2. L1 is called lasso, and L2 is called ridge regression. Well, I mean, yeah, you have regression. And then both of them together is called elastic net. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
L1 plus L2, L1 plus L2 is elastic net.
Elastic net.
So you could use some kind of grid search CV to try to find better penalty and better parameters.
Can you speak to the trade-offs between these three?
So with L1, you get possibly some of the regression parameters are set to 0, so you essentially get model selection. Yeah, and with L2, you just make sure that your coefficients do not grow too fast, too much.
Sorry, say that again.
The coefficients, regression coefficients, don't grow too much. So try and helping to avoid overfitting.
Okay. Thanks, Svetlana. That's good on the dealing with side. On the correlation matrix side, you said, did you say pick one highly correlated one and ditch the others?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I
And
don't know if there are better ways.
what was that, sorry?
Are there better ways to deal with it? I don't know.
No, I just wanted to make sure I heard your point correctly. Do you have a threshold of correlation that you would throw out?
Well, I saw somewhere like 0.75, but I'm not sure if it's a good one. And I think if picking among a group of highly correlated ones, maybe look at the correlation with the target and pick the most highly correlated with the target.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
Yep. With the threshold, from my own just research, it seems like it's a subjective thing. So it seems like it's a case by case of what you determine that threshold to be. I guess the 0.75 is the rule of thumb.
Maybe 0.8, I don't know. Maybe 0.9. Yeah, it depends on amounts of data, or I don't know what else.
I would agree. Any other techniques on the verifying front?
I'm not sure exactly what is multicollinearity, because like when I was thinking about it, I was like, oh, does that mean there are multiple lines that go through the data? So yeah.
Maybe when your rows are linearly dependent.
Yeah, does anybody pretend that was an interview question? Does anyone want to have a go at answering how you might describe multicollinearity?
Yeah, I understand multicollinearity is in terms of data points. If they have the same slope, that's one thing. The other way, in terms of features, when two independent features are highly correlated, has higher relationship in terms of correlation value more than 8.75. So there will be a confined feature, which means the features are really not independent. So there is dependency between features.
Right. Thank you. Anybody else want to chime in from that? I guess that's a nice simple summary is if we're calling them independent variables and they're dependent on one another, perhaps that's not ideal.
One thing worth noting is that you can have a matrix that has linear dependence without having pairwise correlation, right? There could be some linear combination of rows. And that can throw linear models just as much as it would if they were pairwise. Is there a great way to detect those? I guess just like computing the eigenvalues.
Maybe use principal component analysis.
Mm-hmm.
Eigenvalues, eigenvectors. So pick the eigenvectors which correspond to the highest eigenvalues. Those are definitely independent components.
Mm-hmm.
So just to double check, is this like when you're trying to bind a linear regression for different what's it called? variables or any kind of regression.
Does anybody want to chime in and answer?
I think that would be for linear. For logistical as well, you don't want to have redundant parameters. Yeah, so probably any regression.
Yeah, yeah. And I guess specifically the way this question was phrased is it did not actually, if I go back to it, just says you're told that you have a regression model. It doesn't actually specify whether it is a linear regression model or a logistic or another type. So, and again, that could be part of your clarifying questions, but I think in this case, your response to dealing with multicollinearity is probably going to be similar, regardless of the specific model. Any other verifying or dealing with techniques?
I had a clarification question. So you mentioned, I think I heard it twice, about the dependency of rows. I want to clarify, are we talking about dependency of rows here or dependencies of columns when we talk about collinearity?
Right.
Right.
That's
The rows are samples, right? The rows are different readings.
Right. I think
We don't really care how they're correlated or not correlated. We care about the columns, right?
Right. Your features. So
Yeah.
your features, your set of predictors and your target, your predictors, which, like you're saying, George, are your columns. If they're correlating with each other, that is our multicollinearity problem in a nutshell. And that's what your correlation matrix is going to pick up on. If you haven't come across a correlation matrix before, it is a matrix that tells you the correlation metric for each combination of features.
And actually, in our coding exercise, when we're trying to do regression, we're trying to predict the house price, we had features that were correlated. For example, like the size of the house or the number of bedrooms.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think we use correlation metrics. I think we did a pairwise plot of correlation, which is like a visual way of looking at that same information instead of a matrix. Mm-hmm. Then in terms of picking one and reducing the other, I don't know if it makes sense, but when you build a model and you look at the feature importance, I don't know if it makes a difference to pick one versus the other based on the order that they appear in the feature importance list. Mm-hmm. I mean, theoretically it shouldn't, but I'm just curious if anybody is.
Right. I mean, I think that would depend on your model. I mean, if you have I think sometimes those feature importance can be a little, biased. If it's a greedy model that's giving precedence to one set of information, then your feature importance is going to be different. I guess that comes up a bit in decision trees. Maybe I don't know as much as the application or regression scenario, but sometimes that feature importance cannot be too accurate to just take the first one. I don't know if Robert probably would have better insight on that.
No, I mean, I think that's totally right. Right. If you imagine the extreme case where your features are perfectly correlated, then any branch in a tree is going to just randomly choose one of those features. And so which one of them shows up as the more important feature is going to be random. In that case, you may want to think about domain knowledge at least, and maybe there's some at least notional prior distribution you can conceive for your problem and say, well, I think feature one maybe makes more sense to be the regressor than feature two.
Right.
Or in that extreme case.
Or maybe there's some kind of causation, maybe feature one causes feature two, that's why they're perfectly.
Right. I think like going back and investigating why you're getting such highly correlated features is a useful thing to do sometimes.
Like a data leakage that we talked about last week. Okay.
Or it could just be a bug somewhere.
Yeah. I will share with you my solution, just some things that I was researching on this problem, and we can sort of discuss further. Oh, where'd it go? Here we go. And most of this we sort of touched on. So reducing the feature set via a correlation matrix, as Svetlana said, it's identifying and potentially removing the variables that are above a certain correlation threshold. Again, that's subjective, depends on your scenario. If you want to be more strict about the correlation or be more lax, you'll have higher, lower. You also have dimensionality reduction solutions like PCA clustering approaches. One thing I came up in my reading as well this week was, do you care about multicollinearity? And this is, again, the problem space, the domain knowledge, like you said, Roy, as well. If your model is performing really well on the training and the test data and it's suiting the purpose for the model, do we care that there's multicollinearity? Is it relevant to your problem space? And it might just be that you determine, like I said, a different correlation threshold, depending on your circumstances. But of course, noting it in a post-analysis report that there was multicollinearity present based on whatever findings you had, so that it's known to whoever the audience is that existed and you chose to keep it if you did. One detection method is the variance inflation factor. So it is a metric, and I've got some resources to link to this if you want to look up further. But essentially, in your metrics tables where it calculates coefficients, you can also calculate your VIF score for your features, and essentially it tells you the variance with each essentially pair and gives you a metric for that. The rules of thumb around this are 1, meaning no multicollinearity is happening, between 4 and 10, maybe you want to look into that. Could something be happening? And anything above 10 is there's serious multicollinearity. So it can be a good metric to help identify that. As far as dealing with it, standardizing independent variables might be an option. And then if you can't or shouldn't remove variables, then you can use penalized regression, again, what Svetlana was speaking about earlier. And adding some random noise to those correlated variables. So a couple options there. I'm sure there's more to that list. There's definitely more in depth to that list. Looking at that list, does anybody want to speak further to any of those points? If not, that is okay.
So the variance inflation factor is new to me. Is this a pairwise function?
Yeah, so actually I found a few good articles on this as I was reading through it.
Take 1 and divide it by 1. Oh, there it is. 1 minus the r squared. It's essentially giving you the same as the coefficient number, but it's inflating it so that you can see more readily if there's a big correlation.
Right.
The r squared obtained by regressing the jth predictor on all the other predictors, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
That makes sense.
Exactly. So you end up with.
So that takes care of that issue of three-way. Something that correlates but not pairwise would be detectable through that.
Right. And so in your metrics tables, you can get values for each of your features and analyze them in that way next to your PUCs and coefficients. So this is kind of they spoke through a nice example through that, but I found a few good articles on this, which was interesting. So that it's a good detection method. Again, I guess it's context-based on how you would decide to move forward once you have made the detection. And that's when you would circle back to some of these other techniques. When I was thinking about this problem being asked in an interview setting and thinking about why is the interviewer asking you this question, I guess thinking about what is your knowledge on evaluating models and understanding trade-offs, diagnostics, and that kind of factor. It's one thing just to know the models and what, the algorithms and the models, but I guess in a job scenario, they're looking for those candidates who have a holistic thought process in the trade-offs and evaluations of models in the machine learning realm. And then of course, they're also wanting to test your knowledge on regression and multicollinearity. So I've got a couple of resources on this one too. This question, Svetlana actually shared in the Slack channel. This resource was the 40 questions, correct the top 40 machine learning questions. So this was question number 2 from the advanced, which is right down the bottom from the advanced one. So I wanted to make sure that it was available for you to come back to. And thanks, Svetlana, for sharing this resource. So it was, oh, I lost the question now. Here it is. So this question here. And I got a couple more answers just from my own research as well. And then there are a few more resources there for dimensionality reduction, PCA, VIF, and multicollinearity and regression.
You had something about standardizing independent variables. What did you mean by that?
Yes, some of the solutions that I found was just going through and just applying standardization to your feature set can sometimes reduce the correlation. Multicollineation, that point didn't make as much sense to me when you think about it, because it's just shifting. So I don't see why it would.
You're removing the mean and you're dividing by the variance of each feature.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
I don't know how that will help.
I think it definitely, I mean, as you say, it just shifts the values, but it can be important to do in conjunction with some of these regularization methods.
Right. Yeah.
Do you know how regularization works in decision trees, Robert? I haven't seen it yet.
Regularization in decision trees is
No?
more like just pruning, right? I don't know if there's L1 or L2 kinds of, there's no coefficients to regularize in that fashion, like there might be in a neural network or a linear regression model.
So you mainly use a linear model then? L1 and L2?
Yeah, I mean, I think regularization is really just a way of saying, how do you make your model more regular? Which is, just how can I simplify my model so that it's not fitting noise so much, which has totally different techniques for addressing that in decision trees than you would in a linear or a model like a neural network.
Got it.
But to simplify a decision tree model, you typically just want to grow smaller trees.
But I think there is some regularization in those gradient boosted trees, in ensembles, there is some.
Yeah, I think so. I'm not sure about that though.
Yeah, I don't know details about that. It's kind of complicated.
Okay. Take a note.
We shared that article on XGBoost this week. Those scaling tree boosting systems. Well, I have reserved this time for open discussion. So, thoughts, concerns, questions, follow-ups, feedback, all of the above. Firstly, I really appreciate you guys coming. I personally enjoy these sessions a lot. I get a lot out of them, even just curating the questions helps my learning and knowledge. So I appreciate you coming and answering the questions with me. And yeah, if you have any feedback on these sessions, I always am open to it.
About Obsidian MD, I was using it today, but like, how do you make a new node on a graph?
Make a new node on a graph?
Yeah, like make a graph with a
Oh, the network thing?
Yeah.
Yeah, you're linking your notes to each other. So it's kind of like how, let's see what mine looks like. Mine's probably really messy. See if I can show some of mine. I have a couple that if you go to your network here, I essentially use Obsidian to track the questions that I'm studying and take notes on the questions that I'm doing. And so I've got links to notes. I think let's try if I put some of these. Yeah, you can actually put, this is the formatting for that.
Oh, okay.
Take you to the other notebook and show you.
Okay, that's cool.
But if you'd like to geek out over note taking. Does anybody have any feedback on or suggestions of topics they would like covered or types of questions they would like covered as I'm curating next week? More of or less of or the same as?
So you have a list somewhere, right? Did we cover all of it so far, or there's some topics that we haven't covered yet?
Yeah, it's a good question. Some I like to do more than others. Yeah. So we've done a Python, we did product sense last week. We've had 2 modeling ones, did probability today. We did statistics in the first one. We've had 2 SQL ones. Pretty much done all of them. These database and big data ones are tricky to find questions of. They're either very tool specific, asking about, Hadoop or, specific tools. If you would like questions on specific tools to learn about tools, I'm happy to curate those, but I've been trying to make them a little more generalized. But I guess there's some stuff with MapReduce and that kind of stuff that we could talk about with big data.
I think one would be where do you bin, or how do you categorize the different tools out there, because you can group them by how they store data, row format, columnar format, what kind of storage engine they use, what kind of query engine they use, if they're entirely fit in memory, if they fit in the hard disk. So there's a lot of, like you say, hardware specific bins that you can classify them.
Yeah.
More of them are read heavy, many of them are write heavy, many of them are real time.
Yeah.
Many of them are cloud oriented, many of them are on the edge oriented. So
yeah,
maybe a good overview like of where does different technologies and different products fit, and then maybe you can take a deeper dive onto one specific technology.
True. Does anybody have in their industry experience tools in the big data space that you come across a lot, really often, whether you've been at multiple companies and you keep seeing the same sort of softwares and tools coming up in that space? And this, I guess, this is my trouble with it, is kind of company specific, and everyone has a different toolbox.
Yeah, but if you look at the major cloud providers, Amazon, Google, Azure, they all have similar products for similar needs. So I think if we bucket it by need,
right? Yeah.
Like storage, real time, on the edge, read heavy, write heavy, scale, recovery, reliability, and all that.
Right. Okay. I'll do a bit of searching, see if I can get some little bit of focus on that side of it.
And suggestion for another topic, there's no deep learning here. I feel left out.
Seems like a DLA session.
That would require too far of an adventure.
Oh my God. Oh my.
I was just going to say, you already got 2 nights of our week. Do you really need it?
It would be easier than your rollover 7 days of Great Lakes. I can guarantee you that.
But you're very likely to get a question with window functions. Like 80% of all of these job postings for data science, 80% of them have SQL and have, advanced SQL skills listed in them. So it is really important to know it.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, for that reason, that's why I've done 2 SQL questions so far, because it is the most repeated skill. I like to start off with an easy problem. You might have noticed either a algorithms one or a statistics probability one. What do you think about the open-ended questions? Do you find those interesting? Get anything from them?
I like them. I love them.
I think they're fun.
I like those a lot too. Yeah.
Another topic you could add is, I don't know how relative it is, but to me it is. A lot of people use business intelligence tools and data visualization tools. Again, we might get into like specific products here, but maybe there are some things that are common across all of them.
Yeah.
You know what I think would actually be really useful is when to use specific visualizations, right? Like, I mean, I worked at McKinsey for a decade, and you would get people who thought that bar charts were appropriate for everything and that pie charts were appropriate for everything else. And they don't ever show you what you're looking to do. So that's probably another good thing to touch on is when would you use an area chart? When would you use a radar chart? Where are these things different and what are they showing? And I actually have a really good breakdown of those that I used to teach.
Yeah, and there's a Kaggle course on data visualization that covers that as well.
Is that the one that did Alana do that one?
Yeah. In the end of the series, you get a chart that tells you based on different criteria which chart is more appropriate for your case.
Yeah. Cool.
Like, are you looking at a time series and you use these? Are you looking at comparing, categorical variables and use this? Are you looking at something that always adds up to 100? Then you can use a pie chart, but that's the only time you should use a pie chart.
And even then,
sorry, pie charts make me crazy because they're so stupid.
I think just a quick plug, the Deep Learning Adventures group, of which George and Robert are both hosts of, they happen mostly on Wednesdays at, is it 4 p.m? No, it's 4 p.m. my time. 7 p.m. Central? Yep. 7 p.m. Central. Wednesdays, sometimes Fridays.
7 p.m. Eastern, 6 Central.
6 Central, 7 p.m. Too many time zones. Best suggestion is to go on meetup.com and look at Deep Learning Adventures, because these guys do deep dives on these sorts of topics we're talking about. So they also have a YouTube channel, so you can recap if you've missed some. And they did recently do a visualizations one. That's why I bring that one up. Good to check out. I'm trying to think of how some good interview questions in line with visualizations. I might think about that. Whether that would come up in an interview scenario, I don't know, but.
So I actually this morning got one about building dashboards.
Okay.
So they're SiriusXM.
SiriusXM?
Yeah.
Cool. It was about building dashboards. How was the question?
About building dashboards. So I'm trying to think now, because it wasn't like a take home. The guy was literally like, okay, so we've got these sales figures and we want to know what we would do. How would you break this out so that it would make sense for our sales people if they just wanted to quickly look and see where everything was? So yeah, it was kind of along the same lines of building these 7-day averages and these, total, like it was all about advertising on Pandora, right? So it's like total times that this ad campaign was run, how many users, unique users probably heard it, what time was it run the most, what was the demographic group that heard it the most, and then because apparently what they do in this group that I was interviewing with is once those things are all built out, those go out to their actual clients, right? So like if Coca-Cola is doing an ad campaign with SiriusXM on Pandora, they will get all of this metadata from their data pipelines that they've built out internally. So they're going to be super proprietary. And then they send that off to the individual vendors so that they can judge the performance of their ad campaigns on Pandora. But they like to have these dashboards that they can look at immediately at any time that are consistently being updated.
Yeah. Well, good to know that there are asking questions like that.
Yeah, and a pie chart would never be appropriate, just so you know.
So what tools
really
do they
hate them.
use for that?
So
How
they wrote, go ahead.
How do they make those dashboards?
So he didn't tell me what program they used. He was just asking what types of things we would want to put in it. And from talking to them, it sounds like almost everything that they're using, they built out themselves. Because he didn't say it was Tableau, and I'm sure that he would have asked about Tableau experience if it was. So I'm not really sure. This was just their first interview, so
yeah,
wasn't very long.
I might have a think about. I'll try and bring in some more tool specific questions. See how they try them out next week. See how that goes.
Yeah, this guy was also like a high up director, so I don't think he had any actual technical.
Yeah.
I don't think he does any technical stuff. So talking to him, it was more, what kinds of things would you want to give to me? So that was where knowing the audience was really important too.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, your vice president of sales doesn't care if you can write a window function. He just wants to see it.
Another topic, I don't know if you have it in the back of your mind, but these are all technical aspects. I don't know if you're thinking of maybe like soft skills like communication or team building or leading a team or communicating with other teams or explaining your cool dashboard to your non-technical support.
Definitely, and that's definitely a component, sort of cultural questions and that kind of stuff. I guess I've geared this session more to like the technical on site.
Sure.
Just in that, I don't know how as a group we can answer. Tell me about yourself.
Well, and I think the technical ones, yeah, technical questions are actually the hardest because you think, again, you think that they're asking you for a number, but they're really asking you to break down the problem and walk them through how you would solve it. And I think that's one of the reasons why people need so much practice at it, is because they just want to jump to the answer, right? 2 + 2 is 4, but they want to know how you're getting there.
Yeah. Any other interview experience people want to share? Has anyone done an interview recently?
I mean, this morning. But...
or have one coming up that you're feeling nervous about? Or are
Same
you
people again on Thursday?
Interview? Is anyone doing interviews, hosting them? Okay.
I can tell you guys that everybody that we rejected after a technical interview was because they couldn't walk us through their thinking, not because they didn't get the right answer.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, a lot of them would come up with the answer, but it was clear that they had just memorized something from someplace else and would give us the exact algorithm that was written out instead of telling us how they got there, and then they couldn't explain their thinking. So it's more important to be clear about how you get to the answer than actually getting the answer.
Mm-hmm. I was wondering, any more, I guess, senior members of the group, Jim, Robert, George, Svetlana, have you given interviews in your time? That would any of you do mock interviews, that kind of stuff, or on the technical level? Anything that you've come across?
I'm actually hiring for my company, so yeah. If anybody want to practice, I can. I'm happy to, practice along.
Cool. Awesome.
Well, I interviewed people a long time ago for for SPSS, and I would just ask, okay, so, well, we were using C++, so map in C++ was using balanced binary trees at that time. Didn't have a hash table. So I would just ask, okay, what is fast, the map or hash table, and what is the complexity for a map? Most people could not tell me that complexity for a map was logarithmic. I was very upset about it.
Question on that, I guess to people who are working in data at the moment, how much does complexity come up or matter as a data person versus a software engineer? How much do you think you're aware of it in your day-to-day as a either data engineer, data scientist versus being a software engineer?
So I was not aware of it when I worked at Waystar, but again, this came up with the interview this morning with SiriusXM because they've moved all of their services to I think it was AWS they were saying, and so now they actually do have to pay for the processing time. And he's like, and we're over budget every time. So now that complexity and processing time is really becoming important for them. So they want somebody who can go through and be able to make these things run more streamlined without taking up as much processing time. So that complexity really has become more of an issue for them as they're, as they've moved things out to these server farms.
Yeah.
But when we had it in, it was all our own stuff. We didn't care.
Yeah.
Lock it up for days for all we cared. It wasn't going to hurt us.
Yep.
Probably don't want to do that with your healthcare data, but you could.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, well, I guess that's another probably company specific question as well, in a way, role specific in some ways. Well, guys, I don't like to hold you. I don't like to keep you too long. I appreciate you hanging out with me for the last hour and a half. And please join the Slack group if you haven't already. I'll post the slides and the recording from today if you want to review anything. Always available on Slack if you want to chat. And please share the resources and questions and articles that you're coming across during your week that you're finding interesting, because I always enjoy reading them, and I'm sure others do as well. So I will let you go. Thanks for joining, and see you next week.
Thank you very much. Have a nice week.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Everyone.
Bye.
Bye.